Watch complications, some of them are cool, some of them not so much. In today's video, we will do a tier list of the most popular watch complications on the market. Now, you know how the tier lists work. We have ranking from S to D, and the criteria I'm going to use to rank these complications is as follows. Number one, how useful this complication is, right? Very important. Number two, how beautiful it is. Does it add to the overall look of the watch, or does it take away? Some of these complications look fantastic, others may be questionable. Number three, how accessible the complication is, because some of these complications are very useful, but because they're so expensive, it kind of takes them down a notch because they're not very easily accessible for the price. And number four, sort of how cool these complications are. And the metric we're going to use for this is, let's imagine you're talking to a beautiful lady or a man, whatever you're into, at a party, and you're explaining to them this complication. Are they going to be impressed? Or are they going to think this is Nerdsville and back off? Are you scoring or are you not scoring that night? So first up is the classic date complication. I think that's an easy S tier because it is useful, right? You want to know what date it is. There's so many different ways to implement this complication. You could have a classic date wheel at the 3, at the 6, or if you're completely crazy, at the 4:30 o'clock position. You could have the big date, you could have a subdial, you could have a fourth hand representing the date complication. There's so many ways to implement it and to sort of enhance the look of the watch. In terms of the pricing of this complication, it's very attainable. It comes in all kinds of different watches, so that's not really a barrier. And lastly, trying to explain what this complication is, it's pretty simple. Everybody understands what a date is. Moving on to the day date, I think this one also gets the S tier slightly. I was gonna knock it down a little bit because it adds a little bit too much complication to the dial. However, just like with the date, you can customize the watch in many different ways to display the date as well as the day of the week. So it doesn't have to be necessarily the classic, 12 and 3. There are other ways to do it. And as far as the pricing of a complication like this, once again, it's pretty attainable, easy to explain to someone what it is. Moving on to the triple date. Now this one I think gets an A ranking. It is still very useful, but now you're getting a little bit higher in price in terms of the complication itself, as well as the actual servicing costs of a watch with this complication. On top of that, the looks are a little bit more subjective at this time because the dial gets more complicated. You also need to display the month. And in all fairness, the month is not as sort of critical in terms of complications. You probably know what month it is. So this complication is not as useful as the date or the day date. Moving on to the annual calendar. And I think this is going to be one of the controversial ones. I'm going to put it in the A tier. It could go into the B tier, but I feel like it belongs in the A tier just because of how cool this complication is. If you're talking to someone at the party and you explain to them that the watch sort of keeps track of everything, including how many days each month has, and it automatically sort of skips days, I think that's pretty cool. People will instantly get what it is and they would be pretty impressed. On top of that, in terms of the accessibility point of this complication, it's up there, but it's not sort of that crazy for the amount of complexity that you get. Maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like it's an A sort of tier. Moving on to the Perpetual Calendar, I'm actually going to put that in the B category. Now hear me out, I know what you're going to say. That doesn't make sense because Perpetual Calendar is clearly more useful than the annual calendar because it automatically skips leap years and it just kind of keeps track of sort of everything that you need to keep track of. So you pretty much never have to adjust your watch. That sounds fine in theory, but in real world, I think you still have to interact with the watch. You still have to set it. Depends on how many watches you have in your collection. Chances are, if you have a perpetual calendar, you probably have multiple watches in your watch box. You probably still have to set and reset the perpetual calendar once in a while, which loses some of its usability. Also, the price of perpetual calendars gets way too crazy. If you compare the annual calendar to perpetual calendar, the price just sort of gets multiples, which in my opinion is not really worth it. I think for the annual calendar, it kind of makes sense. For perpetual calendar, yeah, you get this one extra complication, but really, how useful is it? In terms of talking about it at a party, I think it would be really awesome. People, again, would instantly understand what it is, and you would probably have some follow-up questions. So that's why it gets into the B tier, not exactly the C tier. Next up, Moonphase. I guess this is B or C. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in a B tier. I think Moonphase gets to the B tier because it is beautiful. In terms of it being useful, probably not that useful in today's world. The original intent behind it was for the sailors to sort of keep track of the tides. Also, some surfers nowadays could probably use this. But really, you have so many different apps that using this complication on a watch, it doesn't really get much use. The only kind of cool part about it is how it looks. There's so many different ways to implement it onto the dial, and pretty much all of them look very beautiful. This is just a very beautiful complication to have on your watch, not necessarily that useful. In terms of the pricing, they are available in some of the cheaper watches, so the price point is not too crazy. And in terms of talking to someone at a party about it, they would kind of think you're a bit of a nerd, right? Like, it looks good, but when you try to explain that this tracks the phases of the moon, they're going to be like, what the hell are you even talking about? Who cares about phases of the moon? Moving on to the chronograph. I think that's an S tier. I use the chronograph on my watches pretty consistently. I know that whenever I review a chronograph, people say they don't really use the chronograph, but I use it pretty much all the time for cooking, for tracking how much work I have done, for tracking the walk times, things like that. I think it's pretty useful. In terms of accessibility, it's not too bad. It exists in watches that are more affordable, especially if you go with something with a manual wind. In terms of explaining to someone what this complication is, again, pretty simple. It's a stopwatch. It's sort of easy to get what it is. And in terms of it being beautiful, yeah, it kind of complicates the dial a little bit, but overall there's so many beautiful chronograph watches, and if you like that look, I think it's an easy S tier. Monopusher chronograph, on the other hand, I'm gonna put that in the C tier. Now, I know a lot of people would be very angry about this because it's a very difficult complication to achieve. Instead of having two different pushers on a chronograph, having one for start, stop, and the second one for reset, you only have one pusher that does all three functions. You have to press it 3 times to sort of reset. So you have the first press to start the chronograph, second press to stop or pause the chronograph, and third press to reset it, which requires a lot of engineering, and it requires a lot of sort of complicated parts in the mechanism. At the same time, how useful is it? Not very useful, right? It's not more useful than the regular chronograph. In terms of the looks, yes, it does remove one of the pushers away from the watch, but that's not really enhancing, improving the looks, in my opinion. In terms of explaining this to someone at a party, they will think you're the biggest nerd ever. Well, no, this chronograph has one pusher instead of 2 pushers, so you can start it, reset it from the same pusher. Like, come on, no one cares about that. And in terms of the availability or the accessibility of a complication like this, it's very expensive. For what it is, I think it's not worth it. That's why it gets to be in the C tier. Moving on to the flyback chronograph function. It's either B or C. I'm gonna put it in a C just because of how expensive it is. So it's a similar story to the Monopusher chronograph, where the uses for this are so specific that they're almost not worth it, and the price points for flyback chronographs are really up there. Now, if we're judging this again from someone who doesn't know anything about watches, about complications, and you don't explain the prices of these complications, that's the whole point of explaining to someone at the party, I think no one would really care that the chronograph keeps on going. If you are not aware, the difference between a standard chronograph and a flyback chronograph function is the fact that when you reset the chronograph seconds hand back to 0, it just kind of keeps on going. So you can time multiple things one after another. Back in the day, I think this was a lot more useful. Nowadays, for how people really use chronographs, I think it's not that useful, so that's why it gets into the C tier. Next up, split-second chronograph. It's another C tier. I think chronographs are just taking a beating. So the split-second chronograph is an incredibly complicated complication. These watches are very expensive. These movements are incredibly difficult to make. However, in terms of it being useful, just like the flyback chronograph, it's not that useful. I mean, yes, you can time two different things because you have two different seconds hand of the chronograph. But in terms of the pricing for this complication, it's really high. It's even higher than the flyback chronograph or the Monopusher chronograph. It's probably the most expensive chronograph function, which makes it very inaccessible. Also, trying to explain to someone this function, they probably wouldn't really get it because in the modern world, we don't really have too many uses for this. Standard chronograph, pretty easy to explain. It's essentially a stopwatch. The split-second chronograph, kind of harder to explain. What is it? Why do you use it? What do you do with it? Yeah, it's not... Yeah, it's a C tier for me. Moving on to another kind of controversial, Tourbillon. Tourbillon, where do I put you? It's at the bottom. It's gotta be at the bottom. Is it C? I think it's C. I think Tourbillon is a C level complication. Back in the day, this complication was very useful because it was developed for pocket watches. Pocket watches tended to stay in the same position, which affected the accuracy of the movement. For wristwatches, this complication, yeah, it's not very useful at all, right? It doesn't really help with the accuracy. Is it beautiful? It could be. I mean, it doesn't work on all watches, but when it is presented, I think a lot of people would find it pretty unique and pretty beautiful. In terms of accessibility, it's pretty high. It's just there for the looks, but it doesn't really contribute to anything else. And in terms of trying to explain this to somebody who doesn't know much about watches, again, they will think you're the biggest nerd in the world. Yeah, it's not a cool complication to non-watch nerds. Next up, minute repeater. So this complication, it has to be another C tier. My God, I didn't think we'll have so many C tiers when I started recording this video. So if you're not aware what this complication is, it essentially has another pusher or another way to engage the movement. And then the movement sort of chimes with different chimes for hours versus minutes. So without even looking at the watch, you can tell what time it is. If you're visually impaired, I think it's a very useful complication. However, if you are able to see, I think it's a pretty useless complication. Is it beautiful? I guess it is. Is it cool? Kind of. I mean, you can kind of show it off at the party. But what really holds it back is the price point of a complication like this. It's extremely expensive for the functionality that it provides. I personally think it's a really cool complication, but sort of for this tier list, yeah, it has to be on the C level. Next up, retrograde minutes, retrograde hours. I'm gonna put that at a D level. Now, could it be in a C? I guess it could be, but I think it's just so useless, right? So the retrograde, essentially, you don't have the hand, either the hour hand or the minutes hand, complete the full 360. It sometimes goes 280 degrees, sometimes it goes 120 degrees. Essentially, the hours hand or the minutes hand, whichever retrograde it is, kind of snaps back. So it goes to, let's say, 60 minutes, and then at the 60-minute mark, it snaps back to 0, and so on and so on. These watches, are they beautiful? Kind of. I think most people would not find them that good looking. I think these watches are for people who already have a vast collection and they're looking for something different. In terms of usability, as I said, I don't think it's very useful. How do you even use that? In terms of price point, there are some more accessible watches with the retrograde, but I think it kind of adds unnecessary complexity to a pretty simple watch. I mean, that could be said about a lot of these complications, but I think this one specifically. And in terms of trying to explain something like this to someone at a party, I think they would get it. It's pretty simple concept, but at the same time, they wouldn't really see the usefulness behind it. I think that's why it's a D. It could be in a C category. You could make a case for it, but I'm just going to put it in a D. Next up, the power reserve indicator. I'm actually going to put this in, is it a B or is it an A? I'm going to put it in a B category, just because sometimes it could be a bit of an eyesore. In terms of the usefulness, it's a very useful complication. You can see how much power reserve you still have left in your watch, especially if you left the watch in the watch box or something like that. You can pick it up and still see, oh, I have a little bit of charge. You know, you wind the watch or you just put it on if it's an automatic watch and you go. I think it's a pretty good sort of peace of mind complication. In terms of its looks, that's why it's in a B category, not an A. I think on some watches it doesn't really work, especially the Grand Seikos. A lot of people complain that this complication shouldn't be there. Of course, there are better implementations than what Grand Seiko is doing. So some are better, some are worse. In terms of the accessibility, this complication is available in pretty affordable watches. And in terms of trying to explain to someone at a party what it is, I think pretty simple, right? It tells you essentially how much gas is left in a tank. Pretty easy concept to understand. The last two we're going to talk about is the GMT. I think that has to be the S tier. I think it's a very cool complication. It's very useful. Essentially lets you track another time zone. And if you have a rotating bezel, maybe 2 other time zones, which is very useful. In terms of accessibility, it's not a very expensive complication. You can find GMT movements for under $500, in watches for under $500, I should say. In terms of beauty, I don't think it really takes away from the watch all that much. In terms of trying to explain to someone what this complication is, once again, pretty simple to do so. Just lets you track another time zone, and the hand goes around the dial every 24 hours instead of every 12 hours. Pretty simple concept. I think it has to be the S tier. And lastly, let's talk about the World-timer. It's very similar to the GMT complication. I'm gonna put it either A or B. I think it has to be B, just because of the price point. It's a very cool complication. The difference between a GMT and a World-timer complication, and I'm talking about a true World-timer complication, is the fact that with the World-timer, you can track up to probably 24 zones. You can track all the different time zones, and adjusting the bezel or having a pusher or having some sort of button on the watch will let you jump ahead and track different time zones. The watch will automatically adjust, which I think is a very useful complication, especially if you travel a lot. On top of that, in terms of the looks, there's so many good looking watches with this complication. In terms of the price and accessibility, I think that's where this complication loses the points. It's not the A tier just because it's so expensive. And again, I'm talking about the true World-timers. There are some more affordable World-timers, but they're not like the true World-timer. I think to get into a proper World-timer, you need $5,000 plus. I think Frederic Constant is probably the cheapest. So that's why it gets into the B tier. And in terms of trying to explain this complication to somebody at a party, I think it's pretty simple to explain what it is, right? It's just basically a complication that lets you track all the different time zones. And when you demonstrate it, people will be like, oh my God, this is awesome. And that's it for my tier list. Did I make you angry with some of my picks? I made myself kind of angry with some of my picks, but hey, that's where the cards have fallen, or whatever the saying is. I appreciate you watching this video all the way until the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more videos like this in the future, and let me know how wrong I am with my tier list. How would you rank these complications? And also let me know in the comment section what other things you would like me to rank on the tier list. Maybe watches from one brand, maybe watches in general. This was kind of fun to do. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.